Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke and this is my podcast Ambient 3D Animations. I'm a 3D motion design freelancer and today we are going to be covering the settings for the volume material and the Pyro volume material inside of Cinema 4D so that you feel confident rendering out your simulations for volumes as well as Pyro. We've been covering a whole lot of Pyro the past couple of months, so I'm excited to be getting into more of the rendering aspects of it. So let's go ahead and jump inside of Cinema 4D and get started. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D. I'm going to be using this cloud simulation that I've created as an example. This one's the one that I made for my logo, but today we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the materials here. So you can find these under the Create menu. You'll see materials, and we have this Pyro volume, and we have this volume. So let's first take a look at the Redshift volume. I'll go ahead and open this in here. And you'll see by default, it's made up of mainly three main components. It's made up of the scatter, absorption, and emission. And you can think of the scatter as in how a light photon goes into a cloud or smoke and how it scatters light within there. You can think of absorption as controlling the way light is absorbed within a volume. So it's easier to think of that in terms of transparency, the density, something appears. Emission is that it glows and emits light. So that would be for a situation like a fire or an explosion. That glowing part, those flames, that would be your emission. So actually the regular volume and the Pyro volume have all the same settings. The only difference is that for the Pyro volume, and I'll create one just to show you how this looks, is that it automatically adds the channels for your fire or your Pyro simulation where it says channel here under the scatter and under the emission. So you can see it automatically added the density channel and the temperature channel in here. Whereas if you were to just use a regular Redshift volume, you'd have to go in here manually, click on the presets, find what you'd like to use. Now, typically for the scatter, we'd be using density. And this density volume grid would be driving both the scatter settings and the absorption settings. So that's why you just see the channel up here. This is actually driving both the scatter and the absorption. For the emission, if you were to do this manually and you wanted to use your Pyro, you just need to go into your Pyro output and add in your temperature for the emission. That's typically what's used. And then it would be set up basically the same way as a Pyro volume material. They have the same settings. It's just one is set up ready to go out of the box pretty much if you're working with Pyro. So those are the main differences. And your channel options are mainly driven by what you have, for example, in your Pyro output. So you can see here that we have color turned on as well. And what we turn on in here, you'll also see here as options. So in Pyro output, you can see the color because I had turned that on. If you want to see something in particular showing up here, you just need to make sure that these are turned on here. And then you'll be able to see them show up in here. So you can even use a volume builder for this. So there's different options here. So let's go ahead and close out of this. I'm going to look at the original Pyro volume that I was using for this. And we'll run through more of these settings. But I think what I'll first do is I'm just going to hit render so you can see where it's at right now. So this is our lovely cloud. And one really important thing to be aware of in your render settings, so I'm going to hit this button up here in the upper right, and you'll see that under our globals tab within Redshift, because we're rendering with Redshift here today, you'll see you have this option called trace depths. And trace depths, what we're going to focus on today is this volume option. So you can think of this is also sometimes called multiple scattering. And as you increase it's increasing the amount of scattering that light will have within the cloud. And you can see that as I increase this, it's also getting brighter and lighter in here. So the more you increase this, the longer it's actually going to take to render, but also lightens it up a little bit because it has more of that light scattering throughout the density of the object. So I'm just going to leave that on there for right now, but that's good to be aware of that it's there, because that does affect the look of your cloud or your fire, whatever you're working on. I'm going to use this example right now to just go through the scatter and the absorption here. Going to make this a bit smaller so that we can also see our lovely cloud and what's happening as we adjust these here. So we have our scatter coefficient, and that's basically the strength of the light that's being scattered throughout. So I'm going to reduce this a little bit. Actually, the higher this number is, the brighter it is. So you can see that's getting a little bit darker here. And the more I increase the scatter of coefficient, the brighter and lighter it gets, because that's that strength of the light scattering through there. I'm going to take this back down a bit. You can adjust the tint of the scattering, so I could make this cloud a little bit more yellowy if I'd like. Before it was actually a little bit more pink. I'm going to reduce this a little bit. So we could make a nice little pink cloud like it's a sunrise or something like that if we wanted to, by adjusting that tint in there. Here on the left, this ramp, this is representing low density, and this is representing high density for your volume channel up here. So if we adjust these values, that's what it's adjusting. So let's click on this one here, and let's change this to be blue, just so you can see it a little bit better. So that's the low density. So you can see that, well, that's more purple. You can see that the purple is showing up around the edges where it's low density. So you can get some really cool effects here. Like this cloud looks very dreamlike. It doesn't look super realistic, but it has a different feel to it. So you can play around with that. And then the high density, let's choose a contrasting color just so that you can see it. Let's make it green. So you can see the high density areas are turning green. So that's how you can control that. I'm going to set this back to what it was at the beginning, or the default rather, just so that we can visualize other things in here a little bit easier. So you can pick the color for the knots in here. You can also adjust how they transition. There's different options in here for how you transition from one of these knots to the other. You can adjust your knot position here, or by just dragging the knot up here. You can adjust your bias position, and that's that little dot up there. So it's basically controlling how the cloud is transitioning from one side to the other in terms of those colors. So you actually have a fair amount of control in here. And if you just click somewhere in the middle, you can add additional knots and additional colors. There are presets. You could load a preset of colors. We could do something crazy like this, and then we have a crazy looking cloud. But you have all kinds of control when it comes to this. I am going to hit undo so that that goes back to how it was. You can also save a preset. So if you get the perfect color combination for something you're working on and you want to use it again, and you know you're going to use that again, you can save it here. We also have this option of color channel. So again, as we talked about, if you add the color channel to your Pyro output as an option, this will be driven by the color options you choose in here. So you can see that when we start off with that light pink kind of cloud color. And I added like a little subtle bit of pink in here. So that is driving the color channel. And you can find that under your Pyro output color if you have it turned on in your Pyro output. And just as a reminder, you actually add the volume material to your Pyro output. So I have that in here. You also have this other option called anisotropy mode. So there's a couple options in here. Let's talk about them a little bit. But they're basically controlling the direction of the light and how it looks inside of the volume. So this one, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, I don't think. Maybe I will. Yi. I don't know how to pronounce this word, but if you do, I'm really interested to know. But if you choose this one, this algorithm works pretty well for how light scatters and for the direction of the light and how that appears for most volumes. This one below tends to be better for things like clouds. So you can use either one. Let's talk about this one first. And it has a range from -1 to 1. And I think this will be easier to see if I actually add in a little bit of absorption. And absorption is controlling the density. So I'm adding a little bit more density to this cloud so that we can see this a little bit better. So that's our absorption coefficient, basically the amount of light that is absorbed, and that is dependent on how dense it is. So I am going to play around with this anisotropy, and let's see what it looks like if I increase this closer to 1. You can see that the cloud is looking a little bit darker, and the direction of light is making the front part of the cloud look darker. If we make this a negative number, you can see that it's becoming lighter. So it's controlling the direction of light within the cloud and how that appears. We can try this one as well and try different numbers in here. And you can just play around with these and see how they look. I'm going to set this back to the one I had here before. I'm going to play around with this absorption coefficient. Let's talk about this. So we talked about how the absorption coefficient, in a way, it's controlling your transparency of your cloud. You can think of it as the amount of light absorbed, or the density of it, I'm going to reduce that to 0, and you can see it's completely transparent. And as I slowly increase this, it becomes a little bit more opaque and darker. And if I were to increase this all the way, it just becomes black. All the light is being absorbed. So this one is a fun one. And similar to the scatter, you can adjust the tint or the color of the absorption. So I can change the absorption to be blue or darker blue. Let's see. So you can see that the cloud looks quite a bit more blue now. I'm going to set this back to the default. Just wanted to show you what that does. And similar to this ramp up here, the end on the left, that is low density. The end on the right is high density. So I'm going to change the color here to pink. Going to change the color here to something very different. Green. That looks crazy, but my goal is really just to show you how it affects color in different areas. I want to change this to something that looks a little bit nicer. Oh, wow. So you can play around with that and get some pretty artistic, unrealistic effects, I feel like, which can be fun to do. And then again, you have the same interpolation options as before. You can adjust your knot position, your bias position as before. You can load a preset or you can save a preset. And again, you can use the color channel or a channel of your choosing in order to control this. So lots of fun options in here. I'm going to set this back to what it was originally. I'm going to make this white. So there's our cloud. And for the emission, we're going to need some fire to be showing those settings in there. So I'm actually going to create a new file for that. And let's add in a fun shape like a platonic. I'm going to add a simulation tag, a pyro emitter, and when we press play, this will have fire. So very super exciting. We have some fire in here. If we want to adjust the voxel count and such, we can definitely do that for sure. But I am mostly focusing here on rendering, so I'm going to make that our main focus. To save us some time, I'm going to use a pyro volume rather than adding in those settings manually. And if I press play, you can see that we have no lights in our scene. But if I add this to our output, it's still going to render even though there's no lights in our scene, because our emission in here, our emission channel has temperature added in automatically, as we talked about happening. And this is the part of the volume that glows. So if you don't want anything to be glowing in here, if you don't want any fire or anything like that, any flames, you basically just need to remove that from in here. And then you can see that there's nothing in there. I'm going to add this back in though. That was just to show you that that actually is what makes it glow. And this is kind of fun to play around with. So we have some fire in here. And you can also adjust the tint or the color of this fire. So I could make it pink if I wanted to. I could make it blue if I wanted to, or yellow. we have some options in here. You can see as I change the color, it updates. And you can also adjust the scale. So this is the brightness. This is the multiplier for the intensity of the emission. So you can see it's a lot brighter as I increase this. It's glowing a lot more. And then it becomes dimmer if I decrease this. And these are actually all keyframeable. So if you want to have your color changing, if you want to have your fire changing color, you can do that for fun. I'm going to set these back to the default. We have different emission modes. Black body is the physically accurate option. So if you're going for really realistic fire that is accurate, this is the way to go. And if you choose this one, you can adjust the temperature further in here because the black body is dependent on the temperature at different points in the simulation. You can also adjust the offset in here. So the offset, what that affects is the strength or the brightness of the emission relative to whatever value is being held within the channel, your VDB grid. So it makes adjustments relative to that and offsets it. And this one actually offsets the temperature. I'm going to put those back to the defaults by clicking there. And maybe I'll just only adjust the offset a little bit so that's easier to see. So you can see that's becoming brighter as I decrease this. So it's at 1 by default. You also have the option of using a color ramp. So I'll go ahead and click on this in here. You can load a preset as we talked about before. This one's called heat, so I'm going to see what that looks like. So that's an option. You can, again, move these knots around. You can change the color of them, change how they transition in here. You can adjust the knot position. You can adjust the bias position. So all those settings are available. I'm going to try loading something else in here. I'm going to use this one. I want to make sure that really is 0%. So we also have these other options that come with the color ramp. Down here below, you can see that we have the option to multiply with the ramp a color channel. So if I were to add a color channel in here, I'm going to turn this on. I'm just going to make this green. So that's really easy to see against this. And they contrast well. So in order to see this begin to take place, I actually need to restart the simulation at the beginning. So now you can see it's green. And I'm going to press the IPR button. Now, if I want to start seeing this in the emission, I need to actually add in the color here, but you can see it's not showing up as an option because we need to add it as an option in here. And now, if I go into here, you'll see that color option. Oh, but I'm adding it into the wrong place. I want to add this into the emission. So, presets, Pyro output color. I'm going to... So we have a few options in here. The first one is multiply with ramp, and that basically takes your color channel and it multiplies that with your ramp as well as the tint in here. So I'm just going to change that. So we can see how that adjusts. You can see how these colors are all kind of working together. I don't really like how this looks, but I just want you to see that's there. And you can choose to replace. So if I choose replace, it just replaces this color channel. It replaces this ramp with this color channel. Multiply with temperature. That'll also take into account the colors in the channel itself. So those are the options for the different color modes in here. I'm going to change this back to black body. Now it looks like your typical fire in here. And that's basically those settings. If you're interested in knowing these advanced settings in here, I will cover those in another episode. So I hope you found this really helpful. I found it interesting learning about all of these settings to create this episode, so I hope you find it interesting as well. And this is us wrapping up for right now. The Pyro options, because I sent out a poll to see what you all were interested in learning more about, and generators are next. So we're going to be talking about that as our next topic. So I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations. It's been really fun covering Pyro with all of you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I love to see comments here. If you found this helpful, please hit like. If you want to be notified when more episodes come out, please hit subscribe and ring the bell. And again, thank you so much.